something that is more prevalent today and is actually becoming increasingly bigger and bigger, this gap between people who find meaning at work and those that they don't. Viktor Frankl said this beautiful thing. Today, we have more means to live and less meaning to live for. Think about it, friends. If 50% of your people don't find meaning at work, all you're getting are their arms and legs. You're not getting their hearts and minds. And think about what it can unlock for you. Hi, my dear friends. In this particular podcast, which is a continuation of our series on how we have made unhappiness a habit, I want to touch on a topic that is really near and dear to my heart. And so instead of 3 unhappiness habits, I'm going to dedicate this episode to just one of those habits. In fact, it's not so much about a habit as about a mental model, a belief that we have all kind of adopted. So many of us have adopted, and we see the world. And that's the belief that work and purpose, meaning in life, don't need to be linked. You know, I've been running workshops on the topic of meaning and purpose. I've been running transformations on the topic of meaning and purpose for individuals and for organizations. And I can't tell you how many times I get asked this question. Why do we have to find meaning at work? I just work to earn a paycheck, and I look for finding meaning outside work. Think about that and see if you are one of those who somewhere might either agree with it, somewhat agree with it, or actually see the work as nothing more than just a way for you to live your life outside. And by the way, this is true across many levels. You know, I've never really quite loved my work, but it's fine. I love my life. I love the luxuries it affords me. And that's more prevalent today than ever before. And so this particular episode, I want to dedicate to bust that myth, to help you through research and science share the cost we are paying, both as individuals, as leaders, and as organizations, if we truly don't play a role in awakening purpose and meaning at work, helping individuals connect and find meaning and purpose at work. What's a huge price we are paying? So let's start with just the most logical point of view that I would like to make to you. What's the most logical argument? Think about what is an activity that you do today that you spend more time on other than sleeping. What's an activity that consumes more of your time than sleeping? For most of you who are working, the answer is work. On average, most people will spend anywhere from 70, 80,000 to 100,000 hours over their lifetime at what you would call work. So when we spend, in other words, almost a third of our lives, and so if so much of our time that we're spending is at work, and we don't find meaning in it, it is nothing but a survival mechanism, then how can we truly thrive or flourish in life? When we don't find meaning at work, we are constantly trying to balance work and life. You know, friends, I always find it curious, isn't it? That when it comes to these demarcations, we make the demarcation between work and life, but we don't make a demarcation about all other aspects of life outside work. For example, we don't say, this is the amount of time I want to spend on myself. This is the amount of time I want to spend with my wife or husband or spouse. This is the amount of time I want to spend with my kids. This is the amount of time I want to spend with my friends. This is the amount of time I want to spend on working out. This is the amount of time I want to spend on community service, etc., etc. We just think about this as buckets that we flow in and out of as life goes on. But when it comes to work and life, we are really trying, like, this is the amount I want to work. I want to set these boundaries at work. Why is it? Often because the work we do has no meaning, has little meaning. Because all the other aspects in life, we do have meaning, so we don't separate it. In fact, if you look at artists, if you look at really great athletes, For them, I'm not sure they separate it that way, right? A painter doesn't say, this is my time to paint, but the rest of the time I'm going to do other things. They constantly think about what they're creating. Same with sports. You're constantly thinking about how you improve your game. Same with many businesses, entrepreneurs who are really living into this work. You think about it all the time, but somehow work and life, when work is devoid of meaning, of course, we try and restrict it as much to the period so it doesn't become more. But I think there can be a different way. There can be a way in which we truly recraft what we do at work. And I'm going to introduce that tool to you later in this podcast. So think about that, friends. Are you struggling to find work-life balance? Or are you truly finding meaning and more hence living into the paradigm of I need work and life to be integrated, to be one thing? That's a bit of the world where I find myself over the last 2 years with Happiness Squad. Look, I loved my time at my prior employer, McKinsey. I often used to tell people I used to work 120% of the time and live 30% of the time. And a lot of people say, so how has your life changed now? Look, I work still as hard as I can. I'm still working long hours because, again, work for me has become life. But when I ask, I think what's different for me is my answer is I'm living 120% of the time. I'm living 120% of the time. And there's only about 25-30% of things that I do that I might not enjoy, right? Sending invoices to clients or, looking some of the social media things that, we post on. I don't really quite enjoy that, but I do that because I know how critical it is towards spreading awareness around the work. So again, the things I don't enjoy are much smaller, but I'm living 120% of the time. And I think that's what becomes possible for so many of us if we find and integrate meaning into what we do. Now, this is, something that is more prevalent today and is actually becoming increasingly bigger and bigger, this gap between people who find meaning at work and those that they don't. So it's a new habit. Viktor Frankl in the late 50s or 60s said this beautiful thing. He said, today we have more means to live and less meaning to live for. Today we have more means to live, but less meaning to live for. Think about that, dear friends. What was true in the 60s has significantly accelerated and is even more true today. In fact, 2-3 years ago when I was at McKinsey, some of my colleagues had done some seminal research around purpose. And what they found was that for 70% of employees in this research study that we did, the sense of purpose was defined by their work. Okay? So for 70%, their sense of purpose was defined by their work. But this is where things get interesting. When you looked at senior executives and you asked them, almost 85% of them, senior executives and upper management, agreed that they can live their purpose in their day-to-day life. 85%. Can you guess the number of what that number looks like for frontline managers and employees? It's shocking, but it's only 15%. 15%. Only 15% of frontline managers and employees agree. 36% are neutral. I may, maybe not find purpose at work. Here's a scary one. 49% disagreed that their work helped them live their purpose, their why. With that entire, think about it, friends. If 50% of your people don't find meaning at work, all you're getting are their arms and legs. You're not getting their hearts and minds. And think about what it can unlock for you. Finally, this is something that is, this is a stat that is a well-known stat around the research done by Gallup, where consistently they find 30% of people find engagement. That number, by the way, drops globally to about 20%, so it's bigger here than in the US. And that's the reason why we really need to take this topic seriously. This is the reason why we really need to think about this. Because the cost we are paying, dear friends, from not finding meaning in our work is actually a very heavy cost. It's a very heavy cost. So let's think about why it's important. Why it's important to really find meaning at work. And let's look at it from different lenses. Let's look at it from the lenses of psychology. Let's look at it from the lenses of science and the science of flourishing and see why this is. We can also look at it in terms of physiology. So let's start with physiology. In my book, Hardwired for Happiness, I highlight several studies that showed how those who find meaning at work live longer, are more resilient, are in better physical health, have lower risk of Alzheimer's. There's a couple that I want to highlight here for you. So there was a study done in 2019 in Japan, and then it was rerun in a different way in 2014. You can find both references in the show notes, where they linked higher sense of purpose to better cardiovascular health and longevity, with about a 17% reduction in risk from cardiovascular diseases. Okay. Rush Medical School, Patricia Boyle, found 2.4x lower risk of Alzheimer's development for those who had meaning. There's extensive research also done on the model Ikigai in the blue zones around people who find meaning live longer, right? It's true for all the blue zone countries or regions in the world, regions where people live longer. There are more centenarians as a percentage of population than ever. All of them find meaning in what they do every day. In fact, if you want to watch a movie that I find so inspiring about this topic, it was Jiro Dreams of Sushi. I think it's available on Amazon. Look it up. Jiro today is 98 years old. Jiro, the reason Jiro got popular was Jiro's sushi restaurant, which is in literally in a train station, was one of the first Michelin star rated restaurants that was housed around a railway station. In fact, this notion of meaning, right? His whole life, his whole work, he still shows up. In fact, his son, who tutored under him at 50 in the movie, was still apprenticing under Jiro, because for him, bringing out the best of the fish in the service of their customers is kind of, that's his work. What he was born to do is what he associates with. And so late into his life, into his 80s and 90s, he still continues to show up, find the fish, and make sushi for his customers. Look, for a moment, let's take a different tack and let's think about, okay, so that's great. We know from a health point of view, we do better in terms of physical health, even psychological health. When we look at the research, what we find is those who find meaning are more resilient, are more adaptable. They face lesser depression and anxiety. And we can look at the beautiful words of Nietzsche, who said, those who have a why can survive anyhow. Those who have a why can survive anyhow. When what we are doing, it is in the context of a bigger why, it gives us the resilience to bounce forward, to keep learning, to keep moving versus give up. So it's a really big deal, right? From an emotional and mental health point of view as well. Finally, let's look at it from a business performance point of view. As an organizational leader, why should we care? So again, if you look at research, and you can search McKinsey and purpose, and you'll find tons of research, because this was a really important part of work that we did as a firm when I was still there. In fact, for the longest time, McKinsey didn't have a purpose statement. And in my last 3-4 years at the firm, that was one of the big pieces of work, where as a firm, we defined our purpose. But what we found in the research was that employees who find meaning have higher energy, but organizations, more importantly, who infuse meaning and lead with purpose also get higher productivity, almost 8% and higher attrition. This work has been looked so extensively. You'll find purpose and meaning show up in every researcher's work on any model, from in positive psychology and the world of happiness. You'll find it in Marty Seligman's PERMA. You'll find it in Tal Ben-Shahar's SPIRE. It shows up in the work of Emma Sepler. It shows up in research being done at Oxford, at London Business School, in the work of Jan Emanuel, Sonia Lyubomirsky. Like, this is, friends, not something that is just something which is, a nice to do. Everywhere we see this work around purpose and meaning and its link to performance is being shown both individually and collectively. Alex Edmonds, who I'm a big admirer of, was one of the first one who went beyond correlation to causation and showed how investing in employees, really making environments flourishing, leads to higher performance. He's also extensively looked at the role of purpose as part of that research on firm performance. And he coins this phrase beautifully. He says, if you want to reach the land of profit, follow the road of purpose. If you want to reach the land of profit, follow the road of purpose. Profits, dear friend, are just a byproduct. The role of businesses to be a force for good and what is the impact is how we can create meaning and connect our employees. One of the ways in which we can do that, I'm going to highlight a couple of additional ones. But one of the ways in which we can really help connect meaning to what people are doing. In fact, the person who really started talking about this and started on this journey almost in the 2000s, right around the time that positive psychology was actually, Marty Seligman was really taking psychology and inviting it to, from studying diseases and illnesses to study flourishing, was starting up. And it was the birth of the conscious capitalism movement. Raj started by studying forms of endearment, where he showed, that there are many firms that when we really create and deliver superior value and have customers fall in love with us, what's the impact? He went on to write books like Healing Organizations. That book, Healing Organization, is filled, friends, with examples of companies that have really elevated and put purpose at the heart of the organization and the performance that they are able to drive as a result of it. If you want to look at one of the most powerful stories of transformations that have been recently written, read a book by Hubert Joly called The Heart of the Business, in which he talks about how the purpose journey for Best Buy was at the heart of unleashing the human magic, as he calls it, in the organization. Under his leadership from 2010 to about 2020, Best Buy saw its best of the days, while its competitor like Circuit City went into bankruptcy. At the heart of that transformation, in addition to a wonderful strategy that informed it, was actually a complete pivot on the purpose. Best Buy was no longer going to be the store that was basically a store for electronics that you could come and buy. Hubert helped fundamentally reframe the purpose and activated it by saying that our job, the job of Best Buy, the purpose of Best Buy, was to help consumers navigate with technology, really help consumers use technology to improve their lives. That purpose, a reorientation, we sell electronics, we sell products, our job is to educate and help the customers use technology in their way to improve their lives, was a fundamental pivot. For every blue shirt who was in Best Buy, most of them didn't change, but their performance, their why, all of a sudden, it was not about how do I upsell a customer. It was how do I solve a problem? How can I help somebody who's older live longer in their homes? How can I help create solutions, right? The whole Geek Squad concept came out of that, hey, we're buying all this technology, but we're not helping. So really, really big deal, right? It's a beautiful book. If you really want to see how you can make it real for you, go read that book. We hope you're enjoying this episode and would love your help in spreading awareness and furthering our mission to help 1 billion people rewire for happiness. Please consider leaving us a review and sharing this podcast with others in your personal and professional life who you feel could benefit from some of these very insights. It's a really simple way to extend and spread positivity. Also check out Rewire, our proprietary offering to move you from knowing to doing, on the Happiness Squad website, www.happiness.squad.com. Rewire uses the science of habit formation and the power of community to help you build happier habits in 5 minutes or less daily. Now, back to the episode. Now, in terms of our leaders, the research at around the same time, so this is all like over the last 20 years, so this is not new news. It's just not talked about. It's not talked about in management literatures, in business schools. It's definitely not talked about at companies a lot. Purpose, most companies have a purpose statement. They might have a mission statement. They're words on a wall somewhere. It might even be in investor statements where we don't keep it front and center. But this notion of really integrating meaning and purpose into how organizations are working, though I love the work done at Michigan Ross at the Center for Positive Organization Scholarship. Professor Jane Dutton and Amy Rusniewski were one of the first to come up with this beautiful tool called job crafting. Job crafting allows us to really help employees integrate more meaning and purpose into what they do every day. So it's beautiful work. So here's all the reasons, hopefully by now you're convinced, why we really need to infuse meaning and purpose into what we do every day. And if you're a leader, to integrate it. So how do we go about doing that? Let's start with the individual level, because without the individual, there is no organization. So at the individual level, let's step back and think about where purpose can come from. Of course, purpose can come from outside of work. For many people, that's what they will say. They find meaning in life outside of work. Purpose can also come from what you do every day in your day-to-day job. And then finally, purpose can come from the organization, what the organization and the impact that it is driving. So let's look at each one of these individually. Let's start with, at an individual level, how can we find meaning? How can we find purpose? And I think this one, it's important to remind ourselves. Viktor Frankl, in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, talks about this very eloquently. Because we always ask, what is the meaning of life? What is out there? And he says, it is us who are asked this question rather than a question we ask others. Also, it's important to think about meaning as not necessarily what's the meaning of life, but how can we make meaning in life, in what we're doing every day. And the model that I love that really helps us do that, and you can do this both at an individual level or an organizational level, is the Ikigai model. A model that was born in the high-end period, really brought to the front around, in the Blue Zones work that was led by Dan Buettner, that came into our kind of, if you will, consciousness in the modern world. It went viral. And so Ikigai is a model that really invites us to use 4 lenses and to really find meaning at the intersection of those. The first is what you love, what you're good at, what your passions are. What do you love? What are your passions? The second is what you're good at. What are your strengths? The third is what the world needs. And the fourth is what the world is willing to pay for. So when we combine these 4, right, these 4 overlapping circles together, at the heart of it is how we can start to find meaning. So it's work that is introspective. That's why in my 9 Hardwired for Happiness model, self-awareness is the heart. You can't find your purpose out there. You have to connect to who you are and do deep inner work, turn that lens inward to start to really explore and evaluate your life. The first is, what do you love? When we are young, that's kind of what dominates our life. We have these big visions, we all write about them in our college applications. We dream about them. So you have to go back and look at your life 20, 30, 40 years and say, hey, what are things that I loved? What were those high life moments? Look at the mega and find in those moments, what were you doing? Who were you becoming? What impact were you doing? What was the environment? I offer an approach around this in my book as part of the chapter on finding your passions. But we can really look at a macro level at those high life moments in our life and what we loved about them. We can, by the way, if that seems too much, you can also do it looking forward. Every day for the next 2 or 3 weeks, write down at periodic times what you were doing and capture those highlight moments. You're really loving what you're doing. So note down what is present in the ingredients in that moment, the kind of work you're doing. Are you inside? Are you outside? Are you under time pressure? Are you not under time pressure? What is this work about? What's the nature of the work? Is it detail-oriented? It is big picture, problem solving. Does it have lots of data? Does it have very little data? Just think about both what gives you energy, but also capture it in those moments when you're finding it really hard to get them done. They'll also be helpful for another exercise, but start from there and just capture that for the next 2-3 weeks. Even you can do it every hour, right? Set an alarm, Every hour, just say, what am I doing? What's my level of energy? Is it high? Is it low? What about it am I liking, or what about it am I disliking? It'll give you lots of data to really tune into what do I love. When it comes to strengths, there are a couple of different ways that you can go about it as well. One, you can actually look and do a formal assessment via Character Strength Finder. Is free. It's available online. You can also use another tool called Gallup Strength Finder. In fact, you can do it with your whole team and share with each other your strengths. But frankly, friends, you can also just ask your colleagues. There's another exercise that came out of Michigan Ross. It's called the Reflected Best Self exercise. The idea is to ask your colleagues when they've seen you at your best and tell you the story of what you were doing and what about you they appreciated. Another really powerful way for you to start to connect back is oftentimes our own strengths, things that we don't really think much about. When we see it reflected back from others, we say, oh, I just thought everybody has it. No, everybody doesn't have it. It's unique. It is so a part of you that you are unconsciously skilled at that versus consciously skilled or consciously unskilled. So really ask your friends, ask your colleagues, ask your family about your strengths. Then when it comes to what the world needs and is willing to pay for, when it comes to what the world needs, notice the articles, news that you read that really triggers something in you, a reaction that makes you want to change something, reaction that makes you want to move into action. Look underneath what about that news story or situation it is. There is lots that the world needs right now, my friends. There is a crisis brewing at almost every theater of our existence. Tune into what it is. What is that crisis, that issue that is your personal calling? And I think it'll give you some clues. Now, the problem is, right, that for many of us, our works that we do, we don't actively look at these ingredients and think about how can we really integrate all of this. In fact, around early in the midst of COVID, there was this huge great resignation wave where people were leaving. Everybody was looking when they stopped and said, we're leaving meaningless lives. And the answer was, let's quit. Let's go. I was quite surprised by that because I was doing this research. I was reading this work. I'd reoriented my own life over the time. And I was surprised because, friends, think about it. If you have a job today, right? If you're working today and you don't find meaning in it, think about it this way. First of all, if your company makes a single dollar in revenue, forget about profits, but if it makes a single dollar in revenue, it's providing some service that is valued to somebody, something that someone in the world needs. Because I don't know the last time I paid money to somebody that didn't provide me service unless I was doing charity. So your company is doing some good in the world. Second, if you have a job, you're getting paid for it, right? So what the world needs, willing to pay for, you're getting paid for it. The world is paying the company and the company is paying you. Third, something that you're good at. So again, if you have a job, you've gotten promoted, there's something that you do better than others. It might be innate or it might be learned. You went to school for it, you've studied, you picked them up. There's something you do better. So here's my invitation, dear friends. If 3 out of the 4 ingredients of Ikigai are already present for you, why not try and infuse more of what you love or use more of your strengths or remind ourselves about the impact that we are making as being part of this company? Rather than wildly chase what I love, and now you've got to solve for the other 3 things. I know of so many people who have left their jobs to become entrepreneurs or join another company and found themselves in exactly the same situation again. Because they were running away from something. They weren't running towards something. When I started Happiness Squad 2 years ago, I had the best life that you could ever have at my old firm. I was absolutely enjoying it. I had repivoted my life towards the work around flourishing within. And so when I decided to leave to really focus on this full time, a lot of people asked me this question. Oh my God, you're so courageous to leave a really well-paying 7-figure job where you're part-time, you're doing amazing work, you love your colleagues, you are so well regarded at the organization, there's so much demand for you. Why are you doing it? how courageous of you to go do it. And I said, it's not my courage, it's my calling. I fundamentally believe that we need to reach 1 billion people around this work and help them flourish. Because unless we fundamentally help 1 billion rewire away from this fear and scarcity mindset through which we are operating, we're going to keep making decisions that are suboptimal for our future. My son was 12 at that moment, and I really wanted to move. And I knew that as much as my life was fantastic and in my own sphere, I was having a lot of impact, the goal of reaching 1 billion people was more accessible, funnily enough, you might say, through kind of my own vehicle, which could serve clients in fundamentally different ways than our traditional model. And that's why I left. But many people leave, they're not running towards, they're running away. They're running away from something. So if you are looking for meaning, find meaning at work, my friends, find meaning at work. Now, if you're a leader, here's some ideas for you. And I think we can leverage the work of Amy Wrzesniewski and Jane Dutton for this. Job crafting is a really, really powerful tool. So 3 orientations again, one, have the dialogue around what drives individuals, what are they looking for, and support them. You can do it by giving them autonomy and flexibility. If they care about a cause, you can create and support them to volunteer. You can do employer matching towards some of the causes. If they want to learn and grow, they want to get an education, you can offer paid college tuitions. Starbucks does that. Costco does that. There's so many other companies that are starting to do that. But really support individuals in those dialogues on what drives you as a human being. What are you looking for? Where are you looking to grow? Really take a whole perspective rather than just a work perspective, and help support them. Help give them meaning. Because for many, that's enough. Now let's think about how you even make the work that they do, what they do at work more meaningful. And I think that's where task crafting can be really powerful, or relationship crafting. 2 of the elements within job crafting. So task crafting is really engaging in a dialogue with the team to see how we can re-architect what we do every day, to infuse more of our strengths into what we leverage, and to automate, delegate, eliminate items that are draining. Or if we have to do things that are draining, we kind of do it in those moments that are naturally lower energy at points for us versus the first thing in the morning. So there's a really powerful way in which we can do task crafting, which is all around how can we do more things that energize and less things that drain by using strengths, by using our strengths every day. By the way, talking of strengths, running a strengths finder assessment and even sharing that with each other, and really shifting our performance management processes from gaps and issues to strengths can itself have a really, really big impact. In fact, at McKinsey, I remember in my 17 years, towards halfway through it, we completely moved to a strengths-based development model, and it made a huge, huge impact on the organization. Now let's talk a little bit about connecting, and it's called cognitive crafting. It's the 3rd part of job crafting. And this is about really defining and helping individuals at organization at all levels have a part in defining the purpose, our bigger why, our reason for existing, and more importantly, activating that why, activating it, living into it every day in the work we do as individuals and in teams. Really, really important work. And, if we start to do that, as I explained to you earlier, any company that is getting a single dollar, they're making a positive impact. We can start to step back, and even if we are 5 layers lower in the organization, bring to life how we are making a positive impact. We are a force for good. Sometimes, if you are a financial analyst working deep in the bowels of an organization, even if a pharma company, you might forget that at the heart of it, your work is enabling the organization to produce life-saving drugs. But you don't have to be a pharma company. You can be a food company. We did this work quite recently with a client called Trivium Packaging. I had their president for the European division, Jahan Zebnoor, who's on a podcast with us about close to 4 weeks ago now. And we talked about how engaging their almost 3,000 plus people in connecting to their purpose journey. And they're a food packaging company, so they make metal cans. They have a beautiful purpose statement, "We contain what matters," which talks about how, the work they do is so tied to improving the quality and delivering their customers' products safely. They do better things for the environment. They take care of their people. But it wasn't the purpose statement, friends, and how beautifully articulated it was. It was more the work on activation. How, by the way, we took that purpose statement and we really made every employee at all levels connect with that and think about how they are going to live what they do every day in the context of that purpose statement. That made such a big difference. Huge, huge, massive difference. And I invite you to think about that. If you have a purpose statement, dust it up and run an exercise. If you want to know how to do this very quickly, the whole exercise we designed and ran for them, you can do with 3 to 4 hours per person. That's it. 3 to 4 hours per person at the senior leadership level is all it takes to run a journey that can reach every employee. So not a very big investment for the massive productivity, attrition, retention, your ability to attract others. It's very easy to be able to run that journey for your employees. The second big part that you can do in terms of an organizational why is to really relook at your values and again have a conversation around those values and what they mean and how they inform what you do every day and how employees can connect to those. Again, at McKinsey, one of the things when I joined, and I'd been at 6 different consulting firms before, one of the things that really differentiates the firm is our approach to Values Day. Every year, every office completely shuts down and we take one day to have all our conversations around our values, how those values show up in how we interact with each other, how we serve clients, and how we really use that as our North Star. And I can tell you, it's one day that it's mandatory to attend. You have to have a very good reason if you can't. We all get together in person. Part of the day is dedicated to values. Part of the day is dedicated to doing some act of service in the community. And part of the day is to just connecting. Shared meaning is a powerful way to create belonging. It's been one of the most transformative things that has continued all the way from the early days into what makes the firm great. I invite you to consider doing something like that. If you want to know how, I'm happy to help. Reach out to me. But there's so many ways, dear friends, that we can fundamentally infuse more meaning individually in our lives and collectively use meaning as a way to ignite the passions and win the hearts and minds of our employees to be able to drive higher impact in the world and be a force for good. So hope this episode was helpful to you. Again, I'm deeply, deeply passionate about this topic. Purpose shows up as the first of the P in our Pearl model of flourishing. And if I can be helpful in any ways, directing you to resources, working with you, connecting you with other individuals who are doing this beautiful work, it will be my pleasure. Please share this episode with others. Please let us know how this content resonated with you. And let us together activate meaning and purpose in the lives of individuals, team leaders, and organizations to truly operate at our fullest potential. Take care and have a great day. That wraps up another episode of the Happiness Squad podcast. We hope you found the insights actionable to enhance your journey towards happiness and fill your life with more joy, health, love, and meaning. Please consider leaving us a review and share the podcast with anyone in your professional or personal life who you feel will benefit from some of these very insights. It's a really simple way to extend support and spread positivity. Take care, and remember, happiness is a choice that's available to you moment to moment in the here and now. Take care and see you next week.